You are now entering the MxU Podcast. No credentials required.
Welcome, everyone, to the very first episode of the MxU Podcast. I'm Jeff Sandstorm, and I'm here with my great friends Lee Fields and Andrew Stone.
What's up?
How you doing, guys?
And we are just here today to let you in on just a little bit of a conversation between the three of us. When we do a MxU event, which is an all-day front-of-house mixing seminar, we basically just let the audience eavesdrop on a conversation between the three of us as we work with three different consoles, three different sets of tracks, three different approaches to mixing, and just ask each other about how and why we do what we do. So we thought we would take that idea into a semi-regular podcast format to let you all just sort of continue to eavesdrop on the kinds of things that we're thinking about and talking about. It might be industry trends or maybe a PA of the day that we've heard about, or an integrator who's doing a great job in a church, or
an integrator who's doing a crappy job.
That might come up too. And so it's really just a chance for the three of us to continue the conversations that we start when we're together in person. In fact, it's funny how the three of us got together in the first place. Lee, why don't you tell the story about kind of how MxU came to be?
So over the past few years, Jeff and Andrew and I, and even other colleagues and peers, we get asked to teach at conferences or trade shows and things like that. So almost 2 years ago exactly, we were at Infocom in Orlando, and we just finished a full day of teaching some audio classes and things like that. And nothing wrong with Infocom, nothing wrong with conferences and trade shows, but we just felt like something was missing. And without sounding arrogantly, a bit for us was like, where do we get to go places and learn? So I don't know if you know this, but all churches tend to meet at the same times. So it's hard for us to get out and hear each other do what we do. Or if you're touring, typically you aren't on the same tour together. That's pretty rare. So we're sitting at dinner after Infocom, and we were legit going to rent out like a warehouse, load in consoles and tracks, and watch each other mix and ask each other questions. And then as I'm slicing into my cheesecake, a light bulb went off, and I said, you know what, guys? I think the church community would actually benefit from this. So what if we opened that up and actually created like a not a conference, but an audio non-conference type of event? And so here we are 2 years later with 2 years of really successful events.
Well, the thing that I remember about the Infocom experience, it wasn't that Infocom is bad or that the content was bad, but I remember the moderator in one particular panel we were doing asked me, hey, what's the first thing you do when you walk up to a console? Well, it's a silly question when there's not a console in the room to walk up to. And so we thought, well, what if we just actually walked up to our consoles the way we would and talk about how we do what we do? And so it's been great just to get the feedback from the guys who come. Everybody is really enjoying it. It's a great day. We get to hear Andrew's sarcasm all day long, which is always
and
always
Andrew
the
brought
most fun.
two consoles, of course.
Of course. But it's great. So for those of you who haven't experienced MxU, obviously we'd love for you to come because we want as many people to be there as possible. But I really do feel like it is the one environment where people who do audio can get together in the same room. The filter comes off a little bit. Well, it's automatically off a little bit because we're audio guys. But we get to share tips and tricks, but also kind of the why behind the what of what we do, and it really resonates well with people. So, Andrew, why don't you tell everybody where our next event is and how they can sign up?
Yeah, what's cool about these is we've just been trying to pick places around the country that we think have things already going on in town, or there's already a kind of a pretty good chunk of people that would show up. So we've tried to strategically plan some of these around NAMM a couple of times, the Philo conference, the first in, last out kind of tech conference. that kind of thing, WFX later in the year. We happen to have, if any of you follow Church on the Move, we did the Seeds Conference for 5 years in a row. And we took last year off, but we're back this year in July, which is such a beautiful time to come to Oklahoma. I mean, middle of July is great, so let's do it. But there's so many people that come here to kind of just see what's going on in the tech world and audio world and all that. It actually was brought up, not by us, but it was brought up by some people on the team here at Church on the Move. Hey, why don't you do a MxU there? So we're having one the day before Seeds, which is probably, it's actually a really great time to have one because there's a lot of people traveling in, and you can come hang out with us for a day, which what could be more exciting and thrilling than that? So
in Tulsa?
Tulsa. I mean, there's nothing better. So anyway, that's happening on July 17th, which is just around the corner, just a few weeks away. And I'm telling you, I'm very much looking forward to it. And we all know conferences have a vibe, and there's all kinds of stuff that we all look forward to or maybe hate about conferences. But I think this one's going to be great, because what a better way to get myself in the mindset of just what I've got to do at a conference than to do a MxU. Because I think I'm speaking for all of us. Like, we walk away challenged. And there's not one of these we've done where I haven't taken something from you guys, and it goes back to the original reason we started these. Can we just get in a warehouse and listen to each other mix and get better? And we do it. We do it for ourselves. So it's, I don't know, it becomes very inspiring to me to just get better and try new things. So anyway, we'll be here on July 17th. You can look on our website and get info and log on and get tickets and all that. That's mxu.rocks. Really simple. And we've got the other dates coming up this year on it too. So great way to
so we'll
get
be
rolling.
in Dallas, DC, Atlanta. Am I missing something?
I think that's it.
Tulsa, Atlanta, DC, and Dallas. Yep.
Yeah. And there are whispers of MxU coming to Europe in the fall. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But they are just whispers. They are not collusion between the United States and Eastern Europe.
Careless whispers at the moment.
No, and we won't be in Russia.
No.
We will not be. That fell through. It's not going to work.
Our chief of staff might be.
Great. So one of the things that we're going to talk about every episode is just stuff that we've seen in the world of social media and articles and Facebook posts and stuff that we think, okay, somebody needs to call foul. Because one of the things that we really want to do is to be helpful in terms of providing not just tips and tricks, but also accountability when it's needed. And, we are responsible for stewardship, and we all work with church resources that are very valuable. And so anytime we see people doing boneheaded stuff, we're really going to try to kick them in the shins when necessary. So I hope that's okay to say it that way, but I feel like somebody needs to. And so might as well be us. 'Cause
why not?
What do we have to lose?
Nothing at all. All the sponsors are going to leave the podcast. Oh, wait, this is not sponsored yet.
So one thing I heard about actually earlier today was a church that is in the middle of a remodel, and they are actually kind of the backstory is they are trying to figure out what to do for their broadcast to their multi-site locations. And so the integrator was speaking to them about the quality of their cameras and some other upgrades that they wanted to do. And so the audio guy kind of piped up and said, well, these Avid consoles that we have need to be replaced. Now, mind you, they have less than 40 inputs, and they're not broadcasting to ESPN. They're broadcasting their pastor's mic and a pair of audience mics to their multi-site locations. So every location has live worship and their own self-contained environment for worship, and then whoever's on video gets fed to other campuses. So it's not like they need a Studer or Euphonics broadcast quality desk, but he saw an opportunity to leverage what little input he had to say, I need a new console. So he thought that the best thing for him to do would be to try to take money out of their video cameras that would help the picture quality be better for everywhere, and instead, I say, stroke his own ego to sit behind an SSL desk. And I just wanted to get your guys' take on that, especially the one of us who sits behind an SSL desk every Sunday.
A lot.
Yeah, I have more than just a take on that. And if you're out there and we're talking about you, please send us an email and we'll talk about this offline. But until then, we're using this as an example because you could apply this to a lot of different scenarios. And the console topic seems to be one that keeps coming up. I think it's a bunch of crap. I think it's exactly what you're talking about. I think someone's wanting to stroke their own ego because they think, well, this console can't sound as good as that console. This happened to me last week. We're Infocom. We were at a house with there's 30 or 40 people hanging out, and a younger audio engineer was there, and he's telling me about his church, and a very similar thing. And he was telling me, the QL console, it's great, but it's just really not doing it for me. I feel like we need something else to really take us where we want to go. And he approached me specifically and was seeking out some advice. So I took this as an opportunity to feed him a slice of humble pie. So I just kind of looked at him and said, hey, can I be really honest with you and you not get mad? Because it could really upset you. And he goes, well, yeah, sure. I go, the only problem in this whole situation is you. You are the only problem with what you're talking about. If you're not liking the results coming from the console, it's the guy standing behind the console, not the console itself. And his eyes got lit up. And luckily, I think it motivated him because then he proceeded to ask probably 10 or 15 other questions. And it was great. And we had a great conversation. And the guy's got a great attitude. And I think because of the rest of the questions he asked, I think he's going to be okay. But I see that too often. People are making decisions on consoles based on preference and what they're considering will make them better, not the simple things like budget and I/O. Like those two things really should drive everything about the console. If on your list of pros and cons about a console are things like parallel compression and delay compensation with plugins and things like that, it's the wrong thing, especially with church, right? We're in competition with the poor when we're spending money. So any dollar you don't spend on gear gets to be spent on the mission of the church.
Lee's starting to preach again, y'all. Look out.
Sorry. Is it getting too serious? We need to tell a joke to cut it up a little?
It's good. I think the other thing that I would say is if there was a real need for a different console, let's say, not necessarily in the case of the Avid, but let's say you're dealing with a console that is losing its support by the manufacturer.
Sure.
Or you are out of outputs, or you're running low on processing or things. If there's a real concern where you need to replace a console, that's great. Let's talk about what are the most wise choices in the budget range that you can afford. In this case, to go from where they were to SSL, you're leapfrogging so many other great options along the way. For example, there are tons of things by Digico that have more I/O than you would ever want to have that would be a great option. Or Yamaha, or even the Allen Heath D-Live and things like that. It's like there's a $30,000 to $40,000 price range that would be nowadays a really viable alternative. So then you don't have to compromise your cameras and your the other core needs that you need for this. If the purpose is broadcast, audio is one of the components of that, but not the main component of your broadcast. So I just think it was an irresponsible conversation.
I'll tell you an example that fits this perfectly. We did a massive remodel here at our church back in 2009. And over the next few years, we didn't leave. I mean, there was no space we owned that didn't get remodeled. So that's pretty cool. When we were remodeling the big room, that was pretty much used as kind of the office of the production team. I mean, we were very, very highly involved in all the details of what went into that. And that was when, Lee, I was actually going to jump into digital consoles, 2009. Yeah. And I had specified a digital console platform I was going to use, and that was great. And I figured now's the time to do it. That's cool. Somewhere along that remodel process and that budgeting process, which, man, we're a big place. There's a lot going on, but it's all scaled. We've still got a budget here, just like everybody else has a budget. It's just scaled to the amount of income and outflow and all that. We made a decision to change and go from video projection to LED. That's quite popular now in a lot of churches. But me handling the budget on all of the production build out, I knew that if we did that, the digital platform I had spec'd was done. There's no way I can make both work. I had a bottom line we cannot go past. But it was a thing of, I had to sit down and make a tough decision. Because not only am I the production lead, I'm the audio guy. I'm mixing. I want things to be cool, right? Who wouldn't? We all want it to be awesome. But I was like, these people are giving all of these millions of dollars, trusting us to make the right decision. Trusting me. They don't even know who I am. But there is some kind of trust that someone's made a decent decision in hiring me and putting me here and giving me a responsibility to do the right thing. To Andrew wanting to stroke the ego of the audio engineer, I need to get all the cool stuff for me. To Andrew, the production manager, who's looking at this as a shepherd over sheep, part of the team that's making good decisions on behalf of all these people that gave it, I knew I had to make the other decision. So when I approved LED, my digital options and my visions of grandeur went out the door. I've never regretted that. And so a lot of people are like, oh, you stayed with analog because you're just so cool. I didn't correct them because why not? Sure, I'll take that.
Hey, I'll take all the people calling me cool I can get.
Heck yeah, man, I need it. So, but that's really why I stuck with analog so long, because we didn't have the money to do it right. And there's something about that. I think in the situation you brought up, Jeff, it's like, man, dude, don't take advantage of the system just because you have the ability. I could send our pastor down the wrong road all of us could every single day if I didn't examine or check my motives.
Yep.
I remember one time he told me somewhere after in all this remodel, and we were having an issue in one of the rooms of just, you mean we have to replace that too? It was one of those conversations. And our senior pastor at the time, he just said, you know what? I've received the worst technical advice over the last 20 years. Just because no one was thinking about the long term and thinking about the big picture and, man, what's better for the room? What's better for our people? Those are big, big decisions that I honestly feel someday we're going to have to answer and account for that. We really are. I mean, you put it on a spiritual level, you're going to have to account for that crap.
Absolutely.
What advice did you give a lead team or a senior pastor or an executive pastor? What advice did you give them that to steer them? Was it the right thing? Was it the very best thing you could come up with at the time? Based on your knowledge and your skill set? Man, that is a freaking huge, huge way to look at this stuff. And so I look at that, do we replace a console with that set of terms at stake? And I'm like, crap, no. You have to make another different decision.
Absolutely. And to Lee's point about, the way I say it all the time is it ain't the arrow, it's the Indian, right?
Yep.
The tools are great, but until the person sitting behind the console is as good as he can be or she can be until the console is the limiting factor on their ability has to come up and up and up. And especially in this conversation, if you're talking about an expenditure differentiation of $100,000,
right,
that could go into better acoustics or better speaker deployment or
planting a church.
Planting a church, right. Right. I mean, but I'm just talking from the technical.
Right.
Like, let's get a really great room tuning and see how far down the road that can get us before we invest untold thousands of dollars in a console that might not have the better experience for your volunteers. It might be way more difficult to train people on. You know, it's bright and shiny and it sounds really good, but man, what are the other roads that's going to complicate as you move forward?
Or let's invest in some training for the engineer and the volunteers. Let's get some mentors. Let's make sure that all that is as good as it can be. When I started here, one of the questions they asked me, it was kind of a fearful question. Are you going to tell us that we need to replace everything? Is that the first thing you're going to do? And, you know, because I think at the time that was like, they don't know what kind of dollars that might mean. And I didn't know it. I didn't know that they were fearful of it at the time of that answer. But I just said, guys, I haven't even been in the room and mixed in here yet. So why don't we go see how the room sounds and see how the PA reacts and see what the console is. In fact, I didn't even know what the console was. But I was looking at the size of the church going, they haven't been doing a bad job. People's lives are getting changed and the place is full every single service. So we're not in disaster mode. We're just in let's get it better mode. That's good. And I remember that answer was just, why don't we just do the best we can with what we've got? And I spent that first year or so was all about teams. Let's work on volunteers. How come there's no qualified audio volunteers when there's 12 or 15,000 people running through here every weekend? Where are they? It was things like that started making us better, not getting a new console.
That's awesome. All right, well, it is that time in the podcast. We have a very, very special guest. I met this guy, oh gosh, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. This is the type of guy that like you read about and you watch all the interviews and then you meet them and just hope that they're like not a jerk, and then you meet them in person and they're just way cooler to hang out with in person. Robert Scovill is the front of house engineer for Tom Petty. I mean, this guy, he'll probably listen to this and he's probably going to hate that I'm going to say this, but you guys can agree or disagree. He may be the most famous and most talented guy that does what we do in the history of the galaxy. That's
a long time. That's a really long time.
I mean, our industry's only been around for about 50 years or so it is what it is. But yeah, gem of a guy, and this interview is really awesome. So here you go.
MxU interview. Robert Scovill, Part 1. Robert is an award-winning engineer that has worked for the likes of Def Leppard, Prince, Rush, Tom Petty, and... Oh, what's that? Did I drop a name there? My apologies. Let's get to the interview.
Well, I thought we'd start, Robert, just by you kind of just filling us in a little bit on what you're up to.
Yeah.
You know, I know has the Petty current tour started yet, or are you still?
Yeah, it's a big long list, that's for sure. I mean, you know, I mean, obviously I'm still working full time with Avid, and you know, January is always a really, really busy time where we're making plans for the year, et cetera. And you know, it seems like every couple of years I get to lump, you know, a Tom Petty world tour in on top of that. And you know, this year, you know, we started planning for it very early. I mean, we kind of knew this was in the wind late last year. So, I mean, literally January 1, we kind of hit the ground running and started putting together plans. And, you know, it was technically for us, it was going to be a big challenge because we were going to switch over to new consoles, the next generation of venue consoles and all kinds of stuff there. So will be our second tour with the Anya PA from EAW. So we feel a lot better about that. You know, we've had a full run with it now. So we feel really good about that and excited about what we're going to do with that PA system. But needless to say, the last, let's call it 8 weeks now, if not, where are we at? Where are we at? April? Okay, like I was saying, last 12 weeks, we have just been heads down, putting together planning every inch of this thing. So, and now we're in kind of rehearsal mode. We spent a week last week at Tom's. We call it the clubhouse, which is just where his big warehouse facility where where he records his records, and we go in there to prep for tours, etc. And then we move it over into a place here in Van Nuys called Showbiz Studios, which is a much bigger stage. We can actually put up a full size stage width here, and they can get used to the stage size. And then next week we'll move into over on the Sony lot and move into full lights, PA, and everything. So, all that's going on. For sure.
When does the tour start?
Tour starts, I want to say our first date is, Andrew probably knows this, April 22nd, something like 20th. There you go. So April 20th. Yeah, so we're right around the corner now. Everybody's got their ears pinned back right now and getting ready. So,
well, at the Passion Conference this year here in Atlanta, I had the pleasure of working with Andrew Dowling, who was out with you guys on the last run. And man, what a great tech. I mean, just super smart and super nice guy. I'm sorry for you that he's not out with Claire anymore, or EAW, I mean, because I guess Claire scooped him up and now he's working for them. So,
well, the really cool thing that I'm learning, being the old guy now, I get to be the old salty dog on the road now, is that there's a whole lot of really good young guys out there right now.
Yeah.
And, you're to some degree, I mean, this is going to sound weird to say this, but to some degree, I'm finding that it's better off to get younger guys involved now in very high-level positions on the tour because they're not mystified by the technology. They don't see it as exotic. I've used this kind of example in the past, but I'm starting to realize I have to apply it to the guys that I'm working with now. Like I used to be amazed with my kids when they would just pick up an iPhone and start working, or even get on a computer, and they were just like, no problem. And that kind of stuff is as exotic to them as the toaster is to me and you. It's just a normal thing. They don't see it as something new. And it's kind of that way with system techs now, where I've had some very, very sharp, very young guys working with me that are not scared by networking. They're not scared by computers. They're not scared by any of that. They understand it implicitly and just accept it as part of the landscape. Whereas if you had somebody that was actually very experienced in touring, et cetera, they're actually intimidated by the technology now. And it can hurt you, of course they have the experience and the mindset, but in terms of the technical know-how and the technical savvy, they can get kind of intimidated if they're not really up to speed on it. So it's really a weird dynamic, a weird balance right now. But having said that about Andrew, I mean, Andrew was absolutely spectacular. But the guy I have now, I think is just as good, if not better to some degree. Sorry, awesome. Andrew, I not mean to knock you there, but, he's absolutely great as well.
Though I think there's a huge lesson there for a lot of our audience who are maybe church guys who get very territorial and like, this is my sandbox and I don't want anybody else to come and play. And, there's this sort of hands on the reins, closed-fisted kind of approach. And man, what I hear you saying is, especially even for us older guys, it's like, that is no way to operate. In fact, you're doing yourself such a disservice by having anything but an open-handed, open-hearted kind of approach.
Yeah,
I think so what would you say to the church guy who maybe struggles with that in their little microcosm of a world?
Well, my life experiences have told me that people that hold on to things like that the tightest are the ones that are the most insecure about what they actually know. And, I've seen this for many, many years in the recording industry. I've seen it for many, many years in the live sound industry. And I have just never bought into that mentality. I tell people all the time, here's how I do it. Here's what I use. I can give you all of the stuff I do to show you exactly how I have it wired. And guess what? You aren't going to get the same result as me.
That's right.
Okay? Because you and I listen different, we react different, et cetera. There is no such thing as paint by numbers. So quit hiding your secrets. Even if I know how you do something, I'm still not going to get the same result you do. Okay, so everybody relax. If your job is resting, your job security is resting on you holding on to this knowledge or this technique or whatever it is, the job probably ain't worth having anyway. So
that's
get on
great.
with it.
Because you were so close when digital consoles hit the street, when they first came out, 10, 15 years ago, well, maybe longer than that now. Did you notice people start holding on to those flash drives like that?
Oh, without a doubt. They saw that coming right away, and I was one of the first ones to go, guys, you need to. I mean, there's so many other STEM conversations we can have as a result of that, but I was like, guys, relax here. And none the least of the reasons, and I actually hosted an entire AES panel on this. I don't know if you were there, Lee. For some reason, I want to believe you were there, but I hosted one on the legalities of that. Like,
I was not there, but I would have been.
Because most people are very hesitant to realize that when you're working for an artist and you build that show file, the artist owns that show file. That is a work for hire. End of story, not up for debate, legal precedent. Okay, so everybody, if you tried to hold that file, like if you got fired from the job and took that file, that's no different than you getting fired from work and driving away with the company car. It's exactly the same thing. You're going to get arrested for exactly the same thing. Take art out of it. There is no art involved there. It's a work for hire, folks. Sorry.
That's great.
Man, I love that. That is so true. We've all been in those situations, like in the church market where someone, they recorded a record while they were, the church sponsored or something like that, and when it comes time to leave, and they're like, okay, where's the master tapes? And it's like, well, they're not with you. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we're laughing, but it's not funny. I mean, that's a reality out there.
It's right.
Yeah, and I think your career has proven how helpful it is, and how I think part of the reason that everybody has the respect and the admiration for you that we all do, is that attitude coming from you that says, you know what, I'm just here to kind of learn what I can and give away what I know, and we're in this together. And I think that resonates, as an example, it just resonates with all of us so well. And we just need to always remind ourselves that's especially in the church, it should be the most healthy.
I'm glad
in that
you said that,
context.
Especially so in the church. I'm glad you put it that way, because I've kind of held that belief, whether I'm in the secular world or working in the church world, that is a servant's role. Absolutely. I mean, you are there to serve many, many masters there. You are not the master of that domain. So everybody take a breath,
So speaking of giving stuff away, why don't you talk to us, if you would, about just kind of your general approach, like when you, especially now in rehearsal, is there, in terms of workflow and approach and just things, let's use drums as an example. Are you changing anything tour to tour? Do you kind of experiment with something new, or try to find a new workflow or a plug-in or something that might be a little different from where you were last time? Or is it kind of just let's start where we left off and build from there? Well,
I have the luxury of being with this band now for, I'm going to have to do the math, 22 years. So, there's always going to be a picking up point where you left off.
Sure.
But we are really good in this organization. I'll give us some props here. We're really good at this organization of kind of putting in some checkpoints for that. Because it's easy just to kind of always think, well, we're always going to be improving. Why wouldn't you? That's okay. I think that sounds better. Okay, let's use that. But we are really good at kind of going back and checking that. It's kind of, at some point you kind of go, well, wait a minute. Is that really better than what we used to have, or did it just excite us for the day? Let's go back and check it,
Yeah.
And we have ways of doing that, certainly in this organization now, with the way we handle multi-track recording, et cetera. Like, I'll give you an example. I have Pro Tools sessions built up, specifically for when I'm in rehearsals, that in terms of takes in the session, I have takes of previous tours. So in a stacked sense, I can look at, okay, that's the 2014 version of Breakdown. Okay, there's the 2000. If I roll back another take, that's the 2010 version, the 2007 version, the 2005 version, and I can compare what we were doing drum sound wise there to what we're doing today, and kind of go, yeah, okay, we're making headway there. Yeah, we're doing good there. Okay,
That's
guitar
really
sounds.
cool.
Okay, wait a minute. We stepped backwards there. Okay, let's go back to what we were doing there. And we try to keep really kind of meticulous notes on, okay, what amp, what guitar was being played there, blah blah.
Yeah,
blah.
Almost like a studio project, like that kind of documentation.
It's absolutely that, without question. It just spans, a matter of years as opposed to a matter of takes on a given record. Like if we were comping guitars working on a record or comping vocals, then we're in a kind of a vertical fashion. We're comparing takes there and saying, okay, I like that line, I like that word, etc. We're not actually comping. We're just using that method to compare.
Have you found yourself going like, yeah, this snare drum's great, but what was it in 2010? And you turn that on and you go, okay, that's the best one we've ever had. What kind of drum was that? What kind of mic was I using?
Yep. That's exactly the process. And
that's awesome.
It's beautiful because it takes away the romance of it, because all bands suffer from this and all humans suffer from this, where you think, oh man, what we were doing in 1989, that was the business. We need to get back to that. Yeah. Only to kind of get back here and go, okay.
What's the phrase? The older I get, the better I was.
That's it right there. Stealing, #stealing that. Yes.
So you're in a rehearsal hall now. When you walk in, you said you started preparing for this quite a bit in advance. What's that? When you say that, what's that actually
Well, this is a
mean?
podcast, so I can't really show you.
Yeah. Is that inputs and stuff like that, or is it a bigger?
Well, that's the minimum of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually talked about this at AES this year. Not AES, at NAMM. I did a keynote for NAMM, and the theme of the keynote was, preparing to go on the road. What do you actually do to prepare to go on the road? And you're going to be surprised at the topics we talked about. But one of them was certainly the logistics of it. And I pointed out to everybody that over the past, I guess it's got to be since probably 2012 now, maybe. I'm going to guess 2012. I have been taking advantage of Evernote. I use a cloud-based storage called Evernote. And on there is every tour that we've done, all of the documentation that we've created or gathered for a given tour. So it's got a signal flow diagram for our MADI setup at the front of house, signal flow diagram for MIDI, signal flow diagram for every patch that we've done, every PA patch, every IP address, everything is stored in that archive. And we start, like for this year, starting January 1, we started building that for 2017. So, every signal flow diagram that has to do with the entire stage, PA system, front of house, and monitors is in that Evernote file. And I give access to that to all the crew members. So on a given day, I could not be at the show and they could have their cell phone and get on Evernote and go, I need to know how that rack is wired. Boom, and there it is. They don't have to go search it, et cetera. And we're so complex right now in these big systems. You've got to have a repository for that information. You can't just grab a flashlight and start looking anymore. That doesn't mean anything anymore, it means something to a degree, but for the most part, we've got to know how things are interconnected before we ever open up the rack,
It's a bit like you're valuable to the tour when you're not behind the desk. Like if you weren't there, how well are things documented? Like your value isn't necessarily like, well, you need to pay me because I'm the only guy who knows how that rack's wired.
Well, they're certainly not paying me because I'm a good mixer. So.
Whatever.
False.
Liar.
It can't be that. Come on. But
so when
I
we
think
talk about,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say those things serve kind of two things. Being able to be that kind of organized and be able to be that kind of together. At least for me, I'll speak personally for me now, because they really remove anxiety from my day. Just as in terms of mental comfort, it's like, okay, I know no matter what goes on, no matter what goes wrong, I have a path to go find that out and figure it out. Mm-hmm. Nothing. Again, you want to kind of take the mystery out of it. I'm all about building constants on a tour. Okay, day to day, this right here is the same. I know I can count on that. I know what parts of the day are going to be variable, and those are things I'm going to have to attack on a day-to-day basis. I can't have things that are constants turn into variables for me. Otherwise, it gets unwieldy. I can't manage it.
That's good.
That's great. It's kind of like the way you say it at your place, Lee, where maximum preparation allows for maximum flexibility and creativity. It's like we can be ultimately creative if we're ultimately prepared. Yep. It's not boxing anybody in. No, it's actually preparing for the things that are knowable, so that when the unknown or the creative moment happens, we're ready to go with it, because everything else is so meticulously taken care of.
It's way more work up front to set up a system and ecosystem production-wise that's set up for an artist to be uber flexible and still win than it is to say, nope, this is what we're doing and these are your only options. You need to stick to this. It's way more work to have a flexible environment, but the outcomes are way better. Yeah, my opinion.
We try and talk about it on a musical level with Tom and the band sometimes, and they're absolutely stellar at doing this kind of mindset of putting boundaries in place on a given, let's say a given song, put a boundary in place on the song so that at some point in the song we can go completely outside the boundary. I mean, we can go outside and know where we need to come right back in and finish the song. You know, it's like you've got to have those boundaries to know where you can be free. You know, I mean, it just sounds weird to say it, but that is the truth. And even when I was producing and doing other things, you know, it was always a matter of trying to get people to buy into that. And it's hard to get right brain people to buy into that concept of boundaries are useful for you. You know, boundaries are going to unlock your freedom. And the one I always use with musicians when I'm, you know, dealing with them is like, look, a key signature is a boundary. Okay? A key signature is a boundary. And if you can be creative inside that key signature, you can be infinitely creative, you know. Going outside the boundary of a key signature and just saying, well, I'm going to play this note that is not in the key signature because that's my art. That's not being creative. That's being defiant, you know. I mean, it's not. Being creative is being creative inside the boundary. And you know, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but I discovered a thing. My mother actually turned me on to this study that was done once, and it always stuck with me. I always remember thinking, that is the answer right there. That is the key to so much of what we do right there. And it was this study of schoolyards. Are you guys familiar with this?
Yes.
Have you heard this thing where they put up a fence or let it be completely wide open, and how the kids reacted to that? Mm-hmm. You know, when there was a fence, I'll just redo it for the listeners if they want to hear it. When they put up the fence, the kids went to the fence and played in every inch of the schoolyard. They took advantage of every piece of it when the fence was up. When they took the fence down, kind of signifying, okay, you're ultimately free now to do anything you want to do, they all huddled to the middle of the field.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, it's awesome.
So, you know, there's safety in boundaries, you know, for sure. And you can be anything you want, you know, be inside the boundary. So, you know, I don't know how we got off on this, but, you know, you get it.
But that's how it works with kids, right? I mean, you know, the ultimate freedom is found from within those guardrails, right? I mean, there are certain things that you are just restricted from, but man, within these rules, you can do anything you want. I mean, that's...
And, you know, I have kids, and I've experienced this very thing. Of course, I'm sure you guys have as well, you know, but, you know, they're going to rebel against it at all costs. You know, they think they shouldn't have any boundaries, but psychologically, they're counting on those boundaries. They're counting on them. Absolutely. Yeah. And you've got to put them in place, you know.
Just like lighting guys.
Say that again.
Just like lighting guys. You know, tell them like, hey, this is it, man.
That's good.
Not where I was going at all. Not where I was going
I need lighting guys because I need a budget to cut so I can get more audio stuff. It's very simple.
There it is.
It works. So seeing your workflow and your rig up close and all that takes a really keen personality for the person that's going to be your system engineer or your A2. How do you, that's not somebody that just shows up first day of rehearsals and you go, oh, hey, how are you? Or is it?
No, it's not.
How do you figure that out? That's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I had to go through it with, you know, when I knew Andrew was not going to be available to do this tour. And, you know, I kind of had some long, I won't say heated is not the right word, but intense conversations with the sound company about it, going, okay, guys, you know what this is. You know what I'm going to demand out of this. you got to find me the right guy here. This is as much about personality as it is technical skills, because from a personality standpoint of view, they are going to get challenged here big time. This is not, you just can't send me the brainiac and think he's going to work out here, because I'm counting on more than just his technical knowledge. Like, for instance, Andrew, you've been to my show, so you've seen kind of what goes on there. But, I'm counting on them very heavily as a pair of ears in that venue. Like, I've got to know that when I say to you, hey, go up in the loge here and tell me what it's like up there, that they can come back and communicate that in a way that I can understand it. And I have to respect their opinion of what they think sounds good versus what they don't think sounds good, And by the same token, and this sounds a little shallow to say it, but they've got to know how to come back and say that kind of thing to me if it's bad.
Right.
And not completely emotionally rip me apart during the show where I'm completely distracted because I'm angry. It's just one of those things, and it's not necessarily that I'm angry at him, but I'm angry because we aren't getting the result that we got up there.
Yeah.
Or that we need up there. So it's not an easy gig.
That dynamic is huge. I think that dynamic is something that resonates not only when you're in a touring market. I mean, that's a huge one at a church. Huge one at a church.
Well, we're back. Man, I tell you what, every time I listen to Robert and or talk to him, I'm just inspired on a whole different level with where he's coming from and his heart and passion for what he's doing. What's interesting is when we did this interview with Robert, he was in rehearsals for the tour they're on now. So that was kind of cool. We're talking to him, and he's on some sound stage at, was it Sony or something like that?
Yeah, somewhere in LA.
Like that. It was just really surreal watching that. And I think we've all been able to see him and hang out with him a little bit over the last few years, but they happened to do their opening night in Tulsa, which was just a couple weeks after we had talked to him. And so I went down and hung out with him for the day. And I'll just tell you what, whether you're a petty fan or not, you cannot deny being there in the presence of someone like that who's done this so much and for so long, the dedication to his craft. He really does know the heart of what he's doing. And these are not Christian acts or something on stage. But, man, Robert just has a heart and passion that shines through what he does. You watch him with his attention to detail. Do you guys? I don't know if anybody that pays that much attention to detail at front of house and just with his rig and how he tackles a mix.
I think guys that usually do what we do are either really good system techs or really good mixers, and he really is both.
He's both.
It's the craziest thing. I've never seen someone be like the best in the world at both of those. He's a freak of nature.
So he is a freak of nature. So we've I know Lee and I hung out with him one day, and he was pivotal a few years ago on helping me understand some of the decisions I was going to have to make about moving from analog to digital. And I've flown out and seen him on my own dime a few times just to go get inspired. Yeah. I mean, that's really what it was.
Yeah, that's good.
Just to watch someone who's good at their craft is a good thing to do. So anyway, again, if he listens to this, he's probably going, "Oh, shucks, guys." But, if you get the opportunity to catch him somewhere, it really is a great time to be inspired and watch someone who's excellent at their craft, at the top of their game. So,
yeah, and I know that he's started a video blog lately. So for those of you who don't know much about Robert or want to sort of get more of a key into his brain and how he thinks about stuff, you can find him on YouTube for sure, and he's posting all of those video blogs regularly. So
this guy, he's a machine.
Go find him and check him out.
Yeah, he's a machine. He's those blogs. He dedicates a portion of the blog to just making sure everybody knows what his daily workout regimen is in these arenas, and he's doing stairs in arenas and like 300 push-ups and all this stuff, and it's actually pretty sickening if you watch it and just realize what what his day's like. But
don't tell my wife it's possible to be fit on tour.
Don't let her see YouTube.
Right.
So anyway, anyway, at those shows, it's always great. It sounds good, man. It's really cool when you go see him, because almost every time he's got an arena made of concrete and glass and very, very hard reflective surfaces, sounding really good. So I know that I'm always impressed with that. Tell me, so that's somebody who I've seen recently. Who have you guys seen recently, just that left a mark on you, just the way it was sounding? Lee, you got anybody?
Let's see. I went to the Kanye show.
Oh yeah,
in the fall. It did. I tell you what though about that. I follow the guy who mixed Front of House on Facebook. His name's Toby. He actually got nominated for Front of House Guy of the Year for that tour, and then he posted on Facebook to his peers, "Hey, please don't vote for me." It was like 6 channels. It was not that hard. But I tell you what, like, I went to that show because of the creative process, what they were doing with the lighting and the staging was really interesting. Because I didn't want you to think I was a Kanye fan. I mean, I am, but you're really going to judge me. So the PA in there, there had to have been 150 boxes in the air that covered the whole floor.
So the guy who did the system teching for that show was also the same guy. So he now works for Claire.
Okay.
And Claire hired him from Sound Image off the Kanye tour. And one of the first events he did was Passion this year.
Okay.
And so he was telling me about the way they had to deploy the PA for that show. And because it was so unique with the stage and there were no seats on the floor for these arenas, so the only way he could deploy the subs and get the kind of energy that they wanted from the low end, he had the subs lined around the dasher wall of the arenas facing in. 56 subs pointing straight at people's kidneys. I mean, it was, he said it was just the biggest challenge of his career. And they had 20 arrays of speakers throughout the arena.
Yeah.
So he had 20 line arrays and 56 subs on the floor pointing in to not a stage.
Yeah, that was the craziest part for me. Was he's on a moving platform. It was probably like a 20 by 20 platform, and the vocal was screaming loud and no feedback. That was the craziest part for me. So I'd love to ask him how he did this, but I then went to the Ariana Grande tour. Keep judging. And he was mixing Front of House at that, and the catwalk at the Ariana show was really long. I mean, it went basically all the way to Front of House. And he had her mic on 3 channels, a stage channel, like a halfway down the catwalk channel, and a fully down the catwalk channel. And so he was processing all 3 of them to treat them differently from where she was at in the arena. And I just thought that was cool.
That is cool.
That's very cool. Well, I'm mixing right now at a high school youth camp. So for me, the best concert is every night.
That's awesome.
They really are killing it. It's great.
You're serious.
I was waiting for the punchline, and then I realized,
that painting on the wall behind you right now does look like a Thomas Kincaid painting that have all made their way down to the panhandle of Florida.
We're doing it, baby.
Lower Alabama. I like to call that Lower Alabama.
Jeff, you're worldwide.
It
it's all happening for you right now.
Whew, it's something, I'll tell you. Well, I guess that wraps it up for today. We would like to thank you all so much for tuning in to the very first episode of the MxU Podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast. Tell all your friends. We'd love to have as many people engaged in these conversations as we can. Please rate the podcast if it's a good rating. And we'd love to have you connect with us on social as well. So we are at MxU ROCKS. That's at MxU Rocks. You can also check out our website, mxu.rocks. Pretty easy to remember. And we'd love more than anything to meet you in person. So please sign up if you haven't already for our Tulsa event coming up on July 17th. The website will also fill you in on our upcoming dates in Atlanta, Dallas, DC. So we just can't wait to see you. Thanks so much for being here today. Guys, it's always such a pleasure to talk to you. And we'll see you next time.
See you later.